debate. Tonight, Ukraine and the concessions that have followed the repression, concessions that don't appear to have satisfied the demonstrators. Indeed, for the last few days, their numbers have grown, as have their demands. So the question for us tonight on the France 24 debate, can Victor Yanukovych survive? That's the question we'll be putting to our guests. Thank you very much indeed for being with us. I'm joined tonight by NIVAT, who is a freelance war reporter and joins us, as does Philippe de SUREMAIN, former French ambassador to Ukraine. Thank you for being with us. Natalia NAROCHNITSKAYA, president of the Institute for Democracy and Cooperation. Thank you for being with us. And GARMAS, who's a member of the Euro-Maidan collective. Thank you for being here with us tonight. We'll also be joined a little later from Kiev by Oleksiy PLOTNIKOV, who's the head of the European Centre for a Modern Ukraine. First, though, let's have a look back at what brought us here. It was on the 21st of November that Ukraine announced it was not signing that deal aimed at strengthening ties with the EU. Riots worsened on the 30th of November at the perceived violence of the government crackdown against the protesters. By December 17th, Russia agreed to buy $15 billion worth of Ukrainian government bonds and to slash the price of gas, an indication that the country was turning eastwards as the pro-Europeans had feared. By the 16th of January, Parliament passed laws restricting the right to protest, which came into force last week. Two protesters died on the 22nd of January, a sign that the protests were becoming deadly after having become more violent. And by the 25th of January, President Yanukovych offered senior jobs to the opposition, the first real concessions that he seemed to be making. We can join now our correspondent in Kiev, Gulliver Cragg, for a look at how things stand in Kiev tonight. After the initial repression, Gulliver, we saw these concessions, particularly the big concessions of today, the acceptance of the resignation of the Prime Minister and the Cabinet, and also the repeal of those laws that had caused so much anger amongst demonstrators. Have they gone far enough, Gulliver?
In short, absolutely not. I think both the political opposition and demonstrators on Independence Square and around the centre of Kiev want much more now than just the resignation of the cabinet. Though, of course, it depends a lot on who Victor Yanukovych might name as Prime Minister now and who else might be appointed to cabinet posts. If opposition sympathisers and figures who are trusted by the opposition are appointed to key posts, then people might start to take that as more of a sign that he really is interested in compromise. I think now most people have a pretty sceptical view of Victor Yanukovych's tactics. They read things with quite a lot of cynicism and they think that he is just manoeuvring. If you're talking about the reaction of the protesters, though, on Independence Square, the news that these anti-protest laws had been repealed was certainly met with a great deal of relief.
Gulliver, very briefly, you've been on the streets ever since those protests began in November. What is the mood tonight amongst the protesters?
As I said, I think that they aren't really convinced that the government really is making concessions. The fear that was hanging over them because of these anti-protest laws has been lifted, at least temporarily. There was a couple of days ago a feeling of excitement because the protests seemed to be spreading to other regions so fast and including eastern and southern regions. But recently, I mean today really, reports that have been coming in have been more along the lines of police pushing back those movements and also other people in those towns and cities making it clear that they don't support the Euro-Maidan, the pro-European movement, and that some of them are increasingly feeling that maybe a hardline crackdown by Victor Yanukovych is necessary. And so that's got people being a little bit maybe more realistic. The slight sort of euphoria and giddy excitement there was when these protests started to spread among protesters in Kiev who were saying, well, finally, it's gone to the east, it's gone to the east. Now they're beginning to realize that things are going to be a lot more difficult. And I think really the feeling today is that the government, although it is seeking compromise and it's seeming to make concessions still seems to be, in terms of the communication that it's making with journalists anyway, seems to be determined to stay in place. Victor Yanukovych as president, I mean.
Thank you for joining us tonight, Gulliver Cragg, there live from Kiev. Anna Garmash, the feeling amongst members of your Euro-Maidan collective must be one of extraordinary hope this evening after these concessions were made today.
There is a lot of hope, that's true, but however, there is a lot of mistrust as well towards the government, because there have been many promises made so far, and none of them were kept. So everybody is asking themselves a lot of questions on how it's going to evolve and what the tactics are, what the strategy is of the president, and of the government as well.
Natalia, NAROCHNITSKAYA, what possibility is there at this point, do you think, that Victor Yanukovych can stay? It seems that as time has gone on, his concessions have grown, the demands of the protesters have grown as well, and they want his departure.
I would like to point out the fact that the type of protesters, as you call them, changed quite dramatically during these over 2 months ago. If it started as clearly and obviously pro-European movement, peaceful demonstration in January, the situation was taken over by the Bolshevik with nationalist slogans, and opposition leaders seem not to have any more a control over them. So they are not they will not be satisfied, because their goal is to overthrow the government totally, and European community has nothing to be so happy about it, because these people are not at all pro-EU people. I'm quoting, that's the only quote I will make, that's why I brought this list with me. As far as the entering of EU is concerned, we can't support it because EU is a supranational organization. Our goal is to complete the nationalist revolution. Putin quoted today one of the UNIAT bishops. It was horrible, and I have seen myself the leaflets, "Let's drown Jews in Russian blood." So the situation has changed not only with in the terms of government Yanukovych is yielding, but the type of behavior of Maidan has changed.
I'd like
a little
to put
bit,
that
and
to
it's very
NIVAT. You've been
alarming.
watching this close up over the course of the last couple of months. Has the nature of the protest changed? Have the type of protesters changed?
The protest in Ukraine is very complex. The thing is, what is for sure, is that people are not happy. So, of course, among those who are protesting, there are many different people. Some are completely in favor of European Union. Some others are not. They are more nationalists. But I would like to say, at the end, who cares really? I think what is really important is that we are witnessing one of the most powerful revolution in a post-Soviet state, and no one knows what will come after that. The president seems to have lost control. The opposition is not really in control also, but I mean both sides are not in control. And I think to me, who is in control is the people, Narod, the Ukrainian people. This is a revolution of the people. This is what is a real revolution. And I would just like to end on that. 10 years ago, we had a revolution, the Orange Revolution, with two charismatic leaders. This revolution did not really succeed. Now we have a revolution with no real united leader in the opposition, but it is succeeding.
And in that respect, Philippe de SUREMAIN, you're a former French ambassador to Ukraine, you know the country very well. In that respect, it reminds one of the successful revolutions of the Arab Spring. I'm reminded of the joke they used to make in Cairo. First, the president threatens repression, then the president offers concessions, then the president resigns. It had happened in Tunisia, it happened in Egypt. And what you were just saying, that is the spirit, that the people have now taken control. Is that how you see events in Ukraine?
Yes. I think the Orange Revolution was a big surprise for everybody. I'm sure that Yulia Tymoshenko was herself surprised what will happen the next day, and Yushchenko the same. And the fact that 1,000 of people gathered on the Maidan was absolutely unexpected. And that was exactly the same during these last events, even if the trigger is not the same. But the fact that the use of force was provoked extremely strong reaction, and the frustration of the population everywhere, by the way, managed to express itself. It was not only anymore the desire of Europe and the European values, but just the search of dignity and to be recognized as a real people. And the problem now, and as it was said, the situation is extremely volatile, and nobody is really in full control. The question is not anymore the party of region, or it is Yanukovych, Victor Yanukovych itself.
Yes, I'd like to put that to Oleksiy PLOTNIKOV, who joins us now from Kiev. Thank you for being with us. You're the head of the European Center for a Modern Ukraine. I'd like to ask you that question. Is Victor Yanukovych still in control? Can he survive after the concessions he's made today, when the people in the streets are clearly now calling for him to go?
Good evening. We have a positive development of situation in Ukraine. We have a first positive step during this day. First of all, the parliament session was held in Kiev, and a law from January 16 was cancelled. The second step is resignation of Prime Minister and Cabinet of Ministers. And I think that the negotiation with our opposition are continuing. It's the third positive step. But I think that this situation has all possibility to normalize. But for your question for Mr. President, I think that President has control in Ukraine. Probably is not control on the Grushevsky Street. Of course, it's absolutely a normal situation. It's violence and riots on Grushevsky Street. But in general, President of Ukraine has all mechanism, has all possibility to control of situation in Ukraine.
I'd like to put that to Natalia NAROCHNITSKAYA. The point is that it isn't just in Kiev anymore. These protests have spread far and wide beyond Kiev, and even to the east of the country, considered strongholds of the president.
I watched closely recently the type of protest. Or I agree that there are a lot of protest emotions in Ukraine, like in Russia, but all these protest emotions are differently shaped and have different ideological motivation at all. That's why it's very hard to combine them into one force, etc. Everybody is playing with these Maidan activists of today as instruments of pressure, but everybody seeks its own things. You mentioned that it was spreading out. But the timing and absolutely synchronized timing of the attempt of capturing the governmental bodies in different provinces, especially in the west of the Ukraine, reveals that there is a center who is commanding them. It can't be there. It's not me, it's The Guardian writes even that even in the Orange Revolution of 2004, all slogans, posters, stickers, or even web pages in internet of first Maidan were of American origin. It's the Guardian says. Well, I'm not trying to say that there is no natural people's resentment of the government, etc., because it's a corrupted system, and we see that
there is clearly frustration.
The eastern part much densely populated than the western, although they don't like this European trend, etc., and they absolutely hate this nationalist, almost Nazi slogans of the Westerners of Ukraine. They are hesitating to lay their lives for Yanukovych also, because they don't like the clan economy, etc. There are two clans of oligarchs in Ukraine, and the first Kuchmas, they are not satisfied with the Yanukovych's business clans
No,
who
they're
forced
fighting
them a
among
little
themselves.
bit.
This is-
And the first clan of businessmen was behind, not behind Maidan, but they were loyal to Maidan. Now maybe they are much more alarmed because it went out of control. And for Europe, it's much more alarming now what kind of forces will take over the Ukraine. And for us all, the most important thing is to save Ukraine from civil war, from disintegration into provinces, because Galicia, actually, Minister Durnovo in 1914 warned our Tsar, saying the only prize in the First World War could be Galicia, but only a madman would like to have Galicia, because who takes Galicia will lose the empire. Stalin, who thought he was very... Galicia didn't share the destiny of the Orthodox Ukraine since 14th century, wandering between Poland and Austria. And they have this dissident religious crusader spirit typical for Europe during the wars between Protestants and Catholics. And that's why they cannot be the force Europe would like to take over.
And NIVAT, there are a number of themes that are reminiscent of what we've heard in other revolutions, which is outside influence, warnings against civil war.
Well, I don't think that we are on the verge of a civil war in Ukraine.
I hope so.
I hope we are not, and I don't think so. I think Ukraine is not as strongly divided between West and East as we Westerners, Europeans, would like to think. I think that the Ukrainian society, which is quite different from the Russian society, is as a whole more politically liberal, more open for something different. It doesn't mean that European Union will take them into the European Union immediately. We all know that
will
it's
ruin
going to
the
be so
EU
difficult.
immediately.
And I don't think the Ukrainian people think that will happen that easily. But the Western European values are attracting the European people, and I don't blame them for that. The thing is, Russia, I understand that Russia, of course, feels sort of threatened by the proximity of what's happening in Ukraine. But as you probably, Natalia, have noticed, even Vladimir Putin has remained quite cautious.
Absolutely.
Very cautious.
Particularly tonight, speaking in
regarding
Brussels.
Ukraine.
And I'd like to come
Absolutely.
back
That's
to that
something to be noticed.
in the second part of this debate. We're going to have a quick break. We'll come back to that question in just a moment. It's 28 minutes past 7. In a couple of minutes, the headlines in the second part of our debate.